to talk about the massive impact of the rising tide of privacy expectation from a consumer point of view, from a regulation point of view, and how the platforms are responding to that. I'm not going to get tied up into the details of it too much. I'm more thinking about the business implications and how we as direct brands can adapt to this new environment and actually take advantage of it. So create competitive advantage from what is a challenging situation for digital marketers, frankly. So I'm going to start by just introducing you to More2, a bit of background on our business. The More2 brand, the business has been around for about 19 years. And in essence, what we help brands to do is make more confident investment decisions based on robust customer insights. And then from those decisions, we help them execute by applying our 19 years of industry experience to better execute their campaigns and to build those campaigns on their own customer behaviors. So the net result of all of this is that the businesses that we partner with grow more quickly than they could on their own, and they achieve their full potential. And we've worked with over 200 clients over the years, 100 of them still working with us right now. So we're passionate about growing direct-to-consumer businesses, multi-channel businesses, e-commerce companies, and that's our singular focus. And that's the lens of which I'm looking at these challenges. Now, I'm going to go back in the time machine back to 1997, which is when this book was last published. And the reason I've chosen this book is because it was required reading at the Institute of Direct and Database Marketing, as it was then called, the IDM, who I did a diploma with way back. And I found it interesting to think back on these building blocks, which were kind of fundamental to the practice of direct marketing at the time, and I still think apply today. And I thought it'd be interesting to bring this old view onto new challenges, because so often these classic approaches give us a fresh perspective in a funny kind of way. And these four pillars were targeting, so who's interested in my product, interaction, how are they engaging with me, have they responded in the past, control, so what am I spending on these customers, how can I track that spend and optimize, and then continuity, how am I building a lifetime sort of relationship with this customer, how do I engage with them from the very first interaction and develop that into a fully fledged kind of commercial relationship. So I'm going to look at those. I'm going to come back to those in a minute as I look at the challenges presented by iOS 14 and 15 and the upcoming, well, not for over a year probably, the changes to Chrome as well. So I wanted to frame it just briefly by looking at the interaction data flow from a basic perspective on a typical website today. So here you've got your customer-facing website that's generating orders and customer data, which are going into your customer database. The database is generating a feed to your email platform, most probably, which is generating opens and clicks. And over here, your website is being tracked by both the Google Analytics pixel, which is more than likely feeding your Google Ads pixel. You might have a separate Google Ads pixel actually. So that's feeding your search and display. And then you've got a Facebook pixel running on your site typically that is closing the loop with your Facebook and Instagram advertising. And for most brands, you're uploading contact data from the database, it could actually be that the contact data is coming from the website in terms of audience feeds to build your custom audiences. So I've taken this simple view to highlight where this kind of ecosystem is now being challenged. On the left-hand side here, iOS 15 has made it much harder for you to track people individually by their email activity. So you can no longer reliably track opens for anyone using Apple devices. Clicks, obviously, you can still track because they're coming through to the website. I'm going to talk in a bit more detail about those challenges. And then on the right-hand side here, possibly a bigger problem for a lot of direct brands, the Facebook view of the world is being severely limited, and I'll talk about how that's happening in a moment. But in essence, that's impacting your ability to see conversion events and to attribute those to customers or prospects. And the reason I've circled this area at the bottom is because one of the ways to mitigate that impact is to introduce the conversions API, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. Now, this is a bit of a scary looking table. For anyone who's watching, if you'd like a copy of this presentation afterwards, just drop me an email. I'll share my email address at the end. But I wanted to link this targeting, interaction, control and continuity view to the changes we're seeing in iOS 14, 15 and Chrome. And the summary here, I'm just going to go along the top. So the iOS 14 change was where Apple had stopped apps from tracking unless by express permission. And we're in a position where only about 20% are opting in on that basis. And in the background, earlier than this year, Safari blocked third-party cookies, way back in March 20. So the Apple view is definitely kind of applying more personal privacy and reducing our ability to track people. The iOS 15 change is much more focused on email, so people can turn off open tracking, they can hide their IP address, hide their email address, and that has some implications. And then Chrome, looking further ahead, and the reason I've included Chrome is because it's part of this overall trend to increased consumer privacy. They've actually just extended the time when they expect to kill third-party cookies, and they think that'll be over a 3-month period ending late 2023. So we know this is all happening, and it's going to limit our ability to track consumers, and we need to understand it and then look for opportunities within that to, I guess it sets the whole market back a little bit based on our current ways of working. We need to choose to step back forward to kind of lean into this and look for opportunities to gain competitive advantage. I'm not going to go line by line here. Just an example, the iOS 14 change actually affects all apps. So it's not just Facebook and Instagram who are going to see less visibility on what people are doing. Facebook got a lot of its kind of behavioral data from app-based activities. So what it's done is it's limited its understanding of the consumers that we're targeting, and in some cases where individuals are not visible, that Facebook is no longer able to connect up the behavior between web browsing and app activity. They're less able to see who's in market. They're less able to model other similar customers. The process is still working. It's just not working as well as it was. From an interaction point of view, there's a large number of events missing. So it's actually harder to track customer behavior and be relevant to them. From a control point of view, with so many conversions missing, Facebook is modeling the missing conversions, but it's still having a detrimental impact on the conversions that they report and the conversions we're seeing. So you've got two things happening here. One is underreporting, and the other is the platform's not working as well as it was. So actually the number of conversions is coming down anyway. So those two are compounding to make Facebook look significantly worse. And from a continuity point of view, if you can't recognize existing customers, your acquisition campaigns will target some of them, and they'll target them as if they were new. So your reporting will look skewed. So I've just gone down one column. Like I say, I can share this after the session to anyone who's interested in having it for reference. So I would class this as life giving you lemons as a marketer. And as I said before, you can choose to build back if you know where to focus your efforts. And Facebook offers some really good guidance on this. Again, I've got some useful links. Just drop me an email and I can share them with you. Firstly, you need to build on your first party data, so deepen your existing customer relationships. And I'm going to go into a bit more depth on a few of these. Secondly, it's about keeping pace with the technical innovations and best practice from Facebook and Google and other platforms. Conversions API is a good start, and I'll talk about that. Thirdly, in a world where your measurement is becoming less reliable because it's having to be either there's data missing or it's being sampled by the platforms to give you the results, incremental measurement is still the gold standard. So it's finding ways to set up a control group and a test group and measure the performance difference between those groups. And this is something we do a lot with our clients, and you can do it if you're managing your own database, and you can properly analyze. You can even build geographic splits and target one approach in one geography and another approach in another. But those approaches give you a more solid basis for making decisions. The next point here is accepting that you'll need to engage with audiences without the personalization you used to have. So in some ways, it will be back to basics, and I'll talk about that. And the final point here is obviously this rising tide of privacy concerns and platforms. If you're not privacy centric, that's going to be a problem for your customers, but it'll also be a problem for prospective partners. Likewise, if you are thinking about privacy and you're working with partners who do as well, that will reflect well to your customers. So the first point here, deepening customer relationships. And again, I make no apologies for these slides being a bit wordy, because I think it's useful to refer back to if you want a copy. The first thing is make it clear why customers should identify themselves to you, why they should use their real email address and not a sort of a proxy one generated for them by Apple. And you can do that if you give them better service as a consequence. Bravissimo, for example, do a brilliant job of this because they retain profiles of their customers so that they know how to, what their best fit advice is. And it means it's much easier for them to purchase when they come to store or go to the website. Consider lead gen mechanics. And this is an odd one because it seems like a bit of a retrograde step, going back to, trying to gather email addresses. But the fact remains that if people are happy to engage with the brand, hear more from you, they're going to share their personal information. And that can happen before a purchase as well as during. The next point here is the impact on your email trigger and engagement models, because often we used to drive a lot of that from open metrics. Those are going away in effect for a large chunk of the audience, all the Apple users, or a large number of them. So it's finding out how else you can trigger that activity. And it could be website browse information, or just using clicks as the driver. The next point here is about segmenting your traffic to better understand how this change is affecting you. So you can already segment into who uses Apple and those who don't, and then track their how they change over time. And then you can measure your open metrics and then recalibrate to adjust for the fact that you're missing a lot of the iOS people. So that's the customer relationships. This next point is about just adopting best practice. And in a world where it's becoming more competitive, best practice is critical. And so many businesses, particularly SME companies, you've got so many different channels to worry about. You've got finite resources. You've also got to worry about your customers, your product. You're juggling so much, and it's really hard to be best practice in every channel. But the fact remains that if you are, you'll step ahead of the pack, and you'll be able to outcompete them in these channels, which are, by the way, still phenomenal places to acquire new customers. So we don't see that changing anytime soon. So Facebook website visitor audiences, we're seeing drop by up to 50% across many clients. So this is a massive thing because it's the most important audience. It's the most engaged people. They visited your site recently, and it feeds your dynamic ads, which is driving your whole conversion process. This sounds like a disaster, but there are ways to mitigate that. But you need to face into it and accept that that's going to be a problem, and it's going to be affecting your sales and your tracking. The conversions API is one important step here. And for those of you who don't understand or know about the conversions API, this is in effect Facebook's way of, instead of the pixel telling Facebook what's happening on your website and what your customers are doing, it's actually your servers behind the website feeding it straight into Facebook based on what data they have. So it's not perfect because Facebook still has to match it back up with their data, and it's reliant on having your information, be it email address, other address fields, to do that matching process. But if you've got a big existing customer base, for example, the conversions API will really help fill the gap of understanding what your existing customers are doing. And Facebook are trying to make implementation of this easier by working with site platforms like Shopify, and they're also looking at how people with Google Tag Manager can implement the conversions API more easily, because it's not a trivial thing from a technical point of view. It should be easier, as I say, because of the site platform kind of partnerships that Facebook's building. The next point here is about lookalike seed audiences. So in a world where there's less data for Facebook, anything more you can bring to the party is going to help your ad targeting and fuel the algorithm. So you need super clean, optimized seed data, and this is your customer address information, and you need to update it frequently, or better yet, via an API or via a platform that's integrated with your database, because that then just, instead of refreshing an entire audience, is constantly updating individual contact records. So Facebook retains its learning of who your overall customer is. That's a really important one. The next thing to consider is are your campaign strategies, your audience strategies, creative approach, bidding, are they kind of best in class? Are you competing effectively? We are probably going to have a biased perspective here, but this is what we do all day long. We're working with well over 30 direct-to-consumer businesses in Facebook, for example, and that's a place where we can really learn how things are changing and help brands adapt. But there are plenty of best practice tips from Facebook, of course, and one of them, for example, here is to consolidate audiences where you can. Run campaigns to bigger groups of people, because that gives Facebook more data to work with. Another example of best practice, moving to Google Analytics version 4, that does a better job of modeling missing data and has a number of other advantages that relate to these changes in privacy. So take a look into that if you're not on Analytics 4, or you don't know which version you're on, which is maybe the case for some people. So next, you've got people who you used to personalize what you were presenting to them. You used to be able to email them with confidence. You used to be able to serve tailored dynamic product ads. Those people will now be anonymous to you. So this is back to I think there'll be a renaissance in creative testing and learning, coming up with generic stories that really resonate with your target customer. And, it could be fresh drops of new products. It could be behind the scenes of photo shoots, whatever it might be. You've just got to get engagement from people, and they've got to be the right people. But remember to iterate around the winners. Don't keep changing things whole scale, and make less frequent changes if you can. Because again, all of this is about retaining learnings and operating in a world of a bit less data. The second point here, Google and Facebook already know a huge amount about these users that you don't. If you give them the power to serve the most relevant creative, they will do. So if you're not already, you need to be offering a variety of creatives in every case. In Facebook, for example, best practice is 3 to 5 ad creatives per ad set. And yeah, let those run and let Facebook make the decision what to serve to who. A more extreme example of this is dynamic ads for broad audiences. If you've not heard of that before, definitely look it up. It's going to be more and more important because what it does is it enables Facebook to choose from your product catalog and serve up the most relevant products to people who you don't know. They might never have come to the website, or they've come to the website, but you were unable to track them. So what it does is it allows you to serve a personalized experience to someone who doesn't know your brand at all, or doesn't know your product, or you're unable to serve a more relevant ad. And the group I was talking about earlier, the recent visitors to your website, if they're not being tracked, this is the ad format that will get to them and will give them a personalized experience. So really important, dynamic ads for broad audience. But the best plan is to run it as an acquisition campaign and accept that you'll capture a lot of your existing customers in there too, if they weren't being tracked. So we're not going to have much time for questions, by the way. This is my last slide. But if we do run out of time, you can drop me an email, or we can have a chat afterwards. This last point is important because if you understand your customer economics, you can make sure you're bidding enough to still cut through to the right people. Facebook and Instagram, and other channels as well. I made the point on an earlier slide. All the channels are affected equally, but if you want to reach your customer, you can no longer just place your bets all in one basket. You need to be thinking about Pinterest and possibly Snapchat, depending on your customer profile, maybe TikTok, dare I say, and test these things, because it's about how you can reach your customer cost effectively. But as competition intensifies, the winners will know how much they can invest to acquire someone based on their lifetime contribution. If you don't understand that, you will probably underinvest, and you'll get either the wrong customer who isn't a loyal customer, is just kind of testing you out, or is buying on a sale, or you just won't appear to the target customer at all, to your best customers. So you've really got to bid enough to reach the right people. From an economic point of view, there's also a gap between what Facebook's going to be reporting on your results, and that's shown in Google Analytics. And that gap is reducing because Facebook is losing some of the conversions. Google Analytics will still be seeing those conversions, but there's still a chunk there that are not being attributed to Facebook. So you need to do your best to understand the true impact of each channel, not just Facebook. And analytics isn't the only way to do it. Live tests will work again within Facebook, and this is the ability to do an incremental measurement, but they won't work without Conversions API. So that's a good argument for implementing it. I would also look for ways across all channels to do this kind of balanced test versus control. And this could be a regional split of the country, running activity in one half and not running it in the other. The summary there being challenge Google Analytics. It's one view on attribution. It's definitely not a truthful one because it is biased to their own channels, but it's obviously very valuable. You just want to be able to temper that with other measurements on the true incremental you're seeing.